Good evening and welcome to the public meeting concerning the Edgar May Health and Recreation Center and the Springfield Foundry project. Just quickly, if I could have a couple people online just help us with the attendance for the meeting. We do need to record the people at the meeting for the EPA as part of our federal grants. From the Springfield Town Library, is that Sue Dowdell?
Yes, it is.
Thanks, Sue. And then Jenna, I have your information. I'll add that to the list. And then with the person with the phone, 802-451-5857, just give us your name and town of residence, please.
They're unmuted. Go ahead and speak.
Go ahead, you can talk. We'll try and come back to them later in the evening. Oh, hello.
Hi, this is Kim Caldwell with Vermont DEC. I wasn't able to join with the Zoom link, but I'm on the phone.
Oh, thank you, Kim. Thanks for dialing in. Well, thank you for coming this evening. We're going to give a short presentation on the Springfield Foundry project. For those of you who don't know the site location, it's 140 Clinton Street. The Foundry building is adjacent to the Edgar May Health and Recreation Center. The Edgar May Health and Recreation Center took ownership of the property in 2000 or shortly thereafter and opened a aquatic facility in 2007. Since the beginning, the Edgar May has had plans to expand into the Foundry building, but due to construction delays and construction costs at the time in 2007, that project had been delayed. We had been required to conduct some testing on the site back in the early 2010s. Stone Environmental was retained to conduct a phase 1 investigation. And I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dan to talk a little bit about the remediation or the contaminants that were discovered, and then the remediation process as approved by state and federal parties. So I'll turn it over to Dan. Yeah. I still haven't gotten it, Dan, but
well, in that case, we might have to wing it without the visuals.
okay.
So, yeah, the Edgar May Health and Rec Center, the Foundry building at the property, as many people here in the room know, was part of a complex of foundering that occurred at that property and across the river where the fire department is now. The purpose of the historical operations in the Foundry building itself were mostly related to taking cast dyed materials and grinding off the casting pieces so they could be brought into the machine shops across town and transformed into what we know as chucking grinders and lathes and all sorts of other great materials that were produced in this kind of time. That historical operations kind of shifted over time to include painting and some more machining and more fine machining at the facility. But it then resulted in some environmental impacts to the property as a result of those activities. If you are aware of the building, you know one of the major features of the building itself is an 80-foot wide gantry crane that is within the space. It's kind of impressive if you've gone in there. And that is one of the sources of contamination of the property. We've had PCBs across the floor of that space that we think came out of the workings of the hoist on the crane and then trespassed across the slab, if you will, just by wheel traffic and people that are walking about doing their job. So the slab is contaminated with PCBs, and that's the primary source that we're trying to mitigate. Through the course of our remediation, our assessment for the remedial planning, we've also discovered that some of the building materials themselves were contaminated. There are some slight amount of asbestos to be dealt with in the roof of the annex structure, as well as lead paint. So the lead paint in the building, the white paint that covers almost all of the interior of it is lead paint. And it also has PCBs, but at a much lower level. Back in the day, paints were often fortified with PCBs to make them a little bit more resilient. So it's a very common thing to have paint in painted that has PCBs in it. So the remedial actions that were most, there's been quite a bit done already at the site. For those that have been around, the western yard just to the northwest of the rec center itself had environmental remediation conducted to remove superficial soil contamination that was to support the playground construction that's there. That was a kind of a funky project that happened as a result of some EPA cleanup grants. There was a sub-grade vault in that section of the property that had to be deconstructed and filled before we could go back and fill it back up and make the engineered barriers that we now support the playground use. So that work occurred in 2014, 2016 timeframe. And since that time, oh, thanks. With that, just do this. Let's go, keep going down. Let's see. Yeah, so we have PCBs in the slab. Thanks, Christian is helping me quite a bit, just showing me my presentation. The building materials. The building itself also has what we call a risk of vapor intrusion. There's contaminants, volatile or contaminants below the building from an unknown source, but they're petroleum in nature, so it's almost like they're almost ubiquitous. But there will be need to mitigate vapor intrusion risk to the building by using a vapor barrier. Pretty standard brownfield contaminant, especially on industrial sites. Exterior soil between the rec center building and the foundry have superficially at the very top, it's clean, so current users are okay. But when we go to put in foundations for the new building, there will be some soils that need to be managed that are contaminated with pHs and metals. And lastly, we've had some related to that soil contamination. There is a groundwater contamination that is present on site that will have to be dealt with through ongoing monitoring. So I just talked about the playground area that was remediated back in 2013 range, and then prior to that, even there's actually been a little bit of remediation that was done to support the rec center work. Some of the excavation that had to happen there had to be dealt with, and included generating quite a bit of soil that went off site, about 200 yards of soil that went off site for that. And then next up. So for this next phase of work, the foundry building, we've talked about removing and disposing of the contaminated concrete. But before we even get to that point, there's a few initial tasks that have to happen. There's quite a bit of stored material that's been accumulating over the tenure of the rec center and even before the rec center took the title. And so there's quite a bit of stored material that needs to be dealt with. EPA considers if it's on the slab, if the slab is contaminated, if there's anything on the slab, it needs to be dealt with as if it's contaminated unless you can prove otherwise. So rather than accumulate a huge bill going to a very expensive landfill, we are going to characterize the material that's in the building so we can appropriately dispose of it without having a huge bill for disposal. There. Nope. The gantry crane itself will be decontaminated and decommissioned, meaning we will wipe it all down using solvents and different types of techniques, lift it off of its rails, put it on the ground, and get it out of sight, take it away. How that happens, if it's a salvage operation or if it's just a recycling situation, is to be determined. Contractors will come up with a plan for that, and creative ones would probably look to sell it. The paint would be sandblasted or media blasted, is probably a more accurate way to describe it, down to clean brick. And a vapor barrier install below a new slab to go in. So working from the top down, it's trying to work from clean, just like you clean your house, work at the top, work to the slab, and then take out the slab and take out possibly some underlying soils, and then put it back together again, installing a vapor barrier, doing some stabilization of the interior masonry using paint and primers to just kind of make sure that things don't degrade until the renovations occur. And then to address the groundwater plume, we'll have a long-term groundwater monitoring plan. And if we achieve compliance just by a factor of natural attenuation of the groundwater plume, more than likely. In a short amount of time, those wells will come out and we'll cease doing that and be okay. So the schedule. The store materials inventory and analysis is occurring tomorrow, where we have staff on site that will be doing some sampling to do that, and some just lots of notes on what is actually in the building. We'll be developing, and then the rest of this winter, we'll be developing demolition specifications for the annex. We'll be doing the permitting requiring to support the demolition, pilot testing for the paint removal, and permit of contractors for both the demolition, the concrete removal, the paint removal, and the rest of the actual. We expect to start the demolition of the annex in the spring and remove the gantry crane with that same contract to have that demolition contractor remove the gantry crane. Then it's, like I said, starting from the top down, we're going to be meeting all the interior surfaces, stabilizing the interior surfaces with paint, and removing the concrete, and then reinstalling the slab. There is likely to be some structural improvements to the building needed for code as the renovations kind of proceed. So we don't want to bring everything back up to like existing conditions, or reinstall the concrete as it is. We know that there's probably going to be some buttressing of the interior walls with some additional footers, but that so we will probably leave a little bit of a moat of new slab to the wall. There'll be exposed dirt that will come back and open back up to reinstall the footers. So that's all hopefully happening between the media blasting through the reinstallation of the slab, or portion of the slab, all this year. So we're trying to get quite a bit done in about 9 to 10 months. So, as a bit of an acknowledgement, this work that we're about to embark on is paid for by 2 grants, one of which is the US EPA brownfield cleanup grant that was awarded to North Star and the Rec Center, and then the Agency of Commerce and Community Development also is providing work. So it's totaling around $3 million worth of funding, plus or minus. And in past work, we've had quite a bit of assistance along the way. Kim Caldwell's on the phone. The DEC has been instrumental in helping this project along the way, dating back to our involvement back in 2010. But also the Mountain Scotty Regional Commission has contributed like several times to this project to conduct those grants.
Thanks, Dan. Are there any questions about the remediation or contamination on site for Dan? Anything you're wondering about the process or what was found, or what will unfold over the next 9 to 12 months?
Really curiosity, is this the first gantry and crane you've encountered in your work?
No,
Really?
no, we took out dozens at JNL.
That many? Okay.
Yeah. But these are not nearly this big. This is the biggest one. It is the biggest one by quite a bit. And no, they're all over town. 100 River Street.
You do.
The PVDC has several. Fellows Gear Shaper, Brian Grinder has several. But Edgar, this is the biggest one that I've seen.
And the most contaminated?
Yes.
Yeah, crane's estimated to be about 76 tons.
Yeah. It's like 80-foot span. All right. It's huge. Yeah. The only ones I've seen that are about the same size are exterior, and they're down in like the GE plants along the Hudson.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Other questions about remediation or contamination? Any online questions about the process or what was found on the site?
Happy to post the presentation with the meeting minutes if that's okay. Yes,
You're also then involved in the remediation of the other brownfields in town?
several. Yeah.
Several. You mentioned J&L and stuff.
JNL, Bryant's, 100 River Street.
Okay.
To.
Well, thanks, Dan. Any last questions online for Dan regarding the remediation and or contamination of the site? Okay. Well, I think what I'll talk briefly about is the redevelopment plan, or what we're planning to do with the site once it is clean. I'm just going to share online a couple renderings here so people can see what we're talking about. But as I mentioned in the opening, the Edgar May Health and Recreation Center, back when it was built in 2005 through 2007, was envisioned as a full facility using the Foundry building for part of its operations. As that was delayed, that became less and less of a reality, but we had the idea of expanding the Edgar May since 2007. Once the environmental issue came about, that became a much more challenging proposition. And it wasn't until we received funding from the Agency of Commerce and Community Development's Brownfield Fund, and then the EPA, that the cleanup became a reality, which allowed us to start looking at the redevelopment of the site. Back in 2018, we began to do a little bit of a process of what we could add to the Edgar May to not only expand our operations, but support what community needs might be in the greater Springfield region. COVID changed that quite a bit. And as we went through COVID, it became very clear that childcare was a major need of the Edgar May, of the region, and should be a part of any kind of expansion with the Edgar May Health and Recreation Center. So what will happen after the remediation is complete is a two-phase redevelopment project. Phase 2, which is phase 2 of the project, will be to construct a 13,000 square foot building that will connect the historic Foundry building to our current facility. This will be 2 floors. The 13,000 feet will be able to contain a licensed childcare facility of about 32 to 40 children, infant, toddler, preschool ages. And that was a really important thing that we determined should be included in this expansion project through our conversations with community partners, with our members, and with other businesses in our community coming out of COVID. So that will take up a major part of this next phase of construction. In this space, we currently lease space in downtown Springfield to offer our group exercise program. In this expansion, we'll move that 1,500 square foot studio that we have in the old Masons building and move that down to the 140 Clinton Street location. We will also expand our fitness space in the fitness center, almost doubling our available fitness space for those of you who have been in our fitness center. There's also significant space to be able to offer community programming. That could look something like after-school programming, weekend school-age programming for kids. Think of big open space in that section that could be multi-purpose and used for a variety of populations. That was something else that we have determined through the last 4 to 6 years as a major need in our community, as something as simple as hangout space for teenagers. Sometimes they use our benches and our equipment as hangout spaces. We'd rather them hang out in our lobby or in a community room as opposed to on our fitness equipment. We will also have some expanded locker room space in this expansion project, or phase 2. Our locker rooms now are a bit tight for the number of people we see on an hourly and daily basis. There'll also be some private meeting space. One thing that we lack when we collaborate with North Star Health, we are a federally qualified health center as our location. And when doctors are seeing patients in our building, there's just not enough private meeting space. So that will also be part of this expansion, or phase 2 of our redevelopment project. The total cost for phase 2 is about $5 million. That includes the childcare spaces and everything that I just mentioned. We are actively seeking funding for that phase. We have received about $150,000 in grant funding in the last 6 months to do some seed planning and some planning work for the campaign, or $5 million campaign that we'll be conducting. So we'll have some active large-scale grants and capital campaign information coming later in 2025. Phase 3 of our redevelopment project is to redevelop the Foundry building, 18,000 square feet of open space. It's one of the largest unobstructed spaces in southern Vermont that doesn't have a post or a beam blocking the floor space. very rare for this size of a space to not have those restrictions. So for those online, you can see the screen right now. But our plan in the redevelopment of the Foundry building is to create a field space option for kids, adults, and people in our region to be able to come indoors in the winter month and play sports, be active like they would be out on a grass field in the summertime. This space is significant, about 75 feet wide by 120 feet long. It would allow us to do indoor soccer, indoor field hockey, flag football, batting practice for baseball and softball, amongst other things, expanding summer camp and after school options for kids in our area. This space would also include a half-court basketball as designed right now to allow kids in populations of all ages to play basketball, and then a pickleball court next to the basketball court, capturing the rise in popularity in pickleball across the country in our region recently. And then lastly, something that's really important to us is an indoor walking track. This was something proposed since the inception of this organization, and something that we feel is really important for our community is to have an indoor space where people can come and walk and move in the winter months due to the climate, due to the location of our community, for them to be safe and exercise in a way that's easy. So that walking track would be a mezzanine level walking track, about 2/3 up the way, up the walls of the Foundry building, within the Foundry building space itself. That phase 3 is a $9 million project, so pretty substantial in terms of its funding, but also substantial in terms of its impact. Phase 2 focuses on childcare, healthcare, expanded exercise service. Phase 3 focuses on, we think, providing more options for residents of our town and community, but also bringing people to our community. So it serves an economic development purpose. If you look at a similar facility in Swansea, New Hampshire, they renovated an old factory building for indoor field sports. And it would have a very similar look and feel to that location. They draw teams, players, from Springfield, from Chester, from Charlestown, from Claremont, all the way down to that facility. We would look at a similar model in drawing people from area communities around here to Springfield to compete in those activities or take part in those activities as well. So the Foundry building, those activities are not set in stone at this point, but they are what our best plan is at this time. We will continue to have community conversations about what the best fit for that space is as time goes on. Phase 2 in our childcare program, our expanded fitness, our community meeting spaces, and our expanded locker rooms, that's pretty set in stone. We're actively raising funds for those for that expansion project as we sit here tonight. So I'll open it up to questions. It's a lot of information about a large space. Think about adding a 13,000 square foot addition and then an 18,000 square foot renovation. That's a lot of space. I'll open it up to any questions people might have about the redevelopment.
Christian, I didn't hear you mention the possibility of a climbing wall.
Yeah, so also within the Foundry building itself, there'll be
That's going to be in the Foundry building, not the.
well, what we consider the Foundry building phase, phase 3. There will, for those of you who have been in the Foundry building, at the very front of the building on Clinton Street, where the big white door is, where the train used to back into the building itself, is a 40-foot high ceiling that matches the height of our outdoor climbing tower, where we plan to replicate indoor climbing, 3 to 4 belay stations, and a small bouldering section, again, that continue to offer year-round rock climbing and activities for people in our region.
When we refer to the annex, we're talking about the shed roof portion.
Right. That's a connect, what we sometimes call a connector building.
Okay, gotcha. Yep. That, so that, yeah, Christian mentioned is not demolished, to be demolished.
If you're familiar with the building, the flat roof of the annex, in the most decrepit part of the building is what would be coming down.
Yeah.
That's a lot of fundraising. Are you guys, is the plan, it's mostly coming from like state and federal grants or?
Yeah, so the
private?
way we've identified our resource roadmap in terms of funds that we have to raise, we are working with a consultant now at identifying both state and federal sources of funds for projects like this, identifying foundation support, both large and small foundations. And then the board of directors has identified a capital campaign that it will also conduct to augment that state and federal and organization grant making. And that's why you have to break it up into phases as well.
Yeah. Are you relying on one of those groups in particular the most? Like, are you heavy on state?
So I would say it's a well-balanced approach to fundraising. We are eligible for up to 55% of the project costs through federal sources based on Springfield, the Springfield region. If you were to look at a USDA grant, for instance. But there are certain restrictions to federal and state grants based on those types of things.
Thanks.
Any other questions about the redevelopment of the Foundry building or the construction of the annex? Again, we'll have a community dialogue as we go through the process. The childcare thing is something I think that's really important to our community. It's a conversation that we hear a lot about people having trouble accessing childcare. And it's a role I think we could provide and fill well in our community.
Christian?
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I know that this has been something you've talked about and you've shared and wanted to make this happen, so I'm very excited for this process. Can you talk to me about the locker rooms? Are you going to be putting in like family locker rooms?
The way it's designed now is that there'll be private locker rooms with a open locker storage area, we would call it. So I think about the old YMCA's I've been in, and there are these baskets, and you put all your belongings in a basket and you lock it, and but you don't change there, you don't do anything in there, you're just putting your belongings in there to store. There'll be these other private locker changing room areas adjacent to that, but they won't be like a full service locker room like you might see on the other side of our facility.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Could you start talking about the time frame a little bit?
Yeah, so
how do you view that? I know some of it's
our hope,
but some of it's actual.
Yeah, so our hope right now is 5 as the remediation will be actively fundraising and seeking those grants out. We have a calendar for the year 2025 of both state, federal, and private foundation deadlines for large-scale capital grants. So that will take 2025. We will probably begin our capital campaign in mid to late 2025, raising about $1 million to $1.5 million through individual donors and businesses and things like that. But then our hope is by mid 2026, we're ready to start beginning construction of phase 2, the connector building.
Excellent. Thank you.
Last call for questions or comments or concerns, either about remediation, if you thought of one while Dan was resting, or about the redevelopment.
Christian,
Yes.
hours of operation, are they, once you start getting these renovations completed, are they going to expand, like for childcare, there may be evening hours versus just daytime, that type of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question, Doug. So two things. Right now, we're open about 93, 95 hours a week, 5:30 a.m. to 9 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and we close an hour earlier on Fridays, and then Saturdays we're open 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. and Sundays 8 to 4 p.m. I don't anticipate our weekday hours expanding much beyond 9 p.m. Childcare will be traditional licensed childcare. There's been some questions about whether there's a need for a second shift or later in the evening licensed childcare. And that conversation has happened at like the Working Communities Challenge group that needs to focus on childcare in our region. And it's been determined there isn't as great of a need for that level of childcare. I think for our facility where you see an expansion of weekend or of hours would be on the weekends. With more offerings, with more to do, we would have the facility open probably later on the weekends into the evening. Did that answer your question? Yeah. The other question that comes up a lot along that is, how are you going to handle operations when you have to demolish an annex or that type of thing? Dan and I have talked about that, talked about it a little bit with the engineer looking at it. And our hope is to minimize that impact during that process.
Very carefully.
So with expanded facilities, you'll have more things happening at the same time. So even though your actual hours during the week might not be, but you'll have opportunities for a lot more people at the same time.
Yeah. And that makes a robust, healthy organization, Walter. When we can diversify what we do, when there's more opportunity for people to be active or participate in activities, I think that's a great thing for the organization and our community.
So where will they park?
It's a great question. For those of you who aren't aware, we have a lease agreement with SRDC for the parking at the Bridge Street location now. Way back, I believe in the mid 2004, 5, 6 range, there's a parking plan to add across the river along the bank behind the fire department. What I think would happen first is we would determine on the Bridge Street location at SRDC a way to redefine or redevelop that parking to maximize its efficiency. Right now, it's not a very efficient parking lot. But I think what we would do there first is to see how we could redefine that and maximize our parking availability. Thank you. Other questions? Great. Well, I thank you all for coming this evening. If you haven't been in the building and would like to see the gantry crane or inside, please don't hesitate to send me an email or give me a phone call. We love giving people tours of it so you can see the size and scope of the building. It is a very phenomenal space. And when you step in it, when we give tours to people, whether it's from the state or from different foundations that are supporting what we're trying to do, they immediately gasp when they step in there because they can see the vision of what it could be like down the road. So,
Are the photographs or the renditions available online?
they are on our website. Yeah. So if you go to the edgarmay.org, under About Us, there's the Foundry Project. You'll find project updates and information, and we'll keep the public informed throughout the process of what's going on through that site. But also there are pictures and renderings of the plans and stuff on there as well.
Closed toe shoes.
Yes, and we usually just peek in, Dan. We kind of.
One last thing, as you're kind of going through this whole process and everything, I'm also involved in the Historical Society.
Yeah.
If you happen to see things that are manageable, that might be of historic significance, you might want to give us a call. We couldn't accommodate anything, like the frame. There's small items that, I know we have a couple of stoves that were produced there.
What we should get you in the meantime, Walter, is we have a great book on the history of the Foundry. If you don't have that book at the Historical Society, we should get you a copy. DJ and Alan Fusoni, former Springfield residents, wrote a phenomenal book on the history of the Foundry building and the manufacturing that took place there. We reference that a lot. As part of the EPA requirement, we have to do a review of the historical impact of our project. We use that book a lot for the information that we provided in that report as a way to show kind of the importance of that building and its historical aspect.
Just for your information, with the Weathersfield Dam project and also with the Valley Street Dam project also, when they had to do their historical analysis and everything, one of the things they were required to do was have it available or have a presentation available online or in person at the Museum of the Historical Society. I'm sure we would be happy to work with you on that also.
That would be great. One thing we are required to put in place after that Section 106 review is a historical marker on the site indicating the significance of the manufacturing on the property and in that building. So that's something that we'll be working with Department of Historic Preservation on as 2025 goes by. And that needs to be in place by the time the redevelopment starts. Well, thank you very much for your time tonight. We appreciate the ability to use this room and host this meeting and to have all of you here. Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you for those online.
Did you get Jennifer Nelson?
I did, Jennifer.
Recording stopped.
Okay, it is 6 o'clock. I'd like to open up this evening's public hearing for the purposes of the town budget for the ensuing year. And I believe the town manager has the information he wants to report on.
The purpose of this public hearing is to allow our citizens to discuss and provide input on the proposed budget. The town has held multiple budget workshops and the Budget Advisory Committee has spent many hours in meetings to develop a proposed budget that we're receiving input on tonight. If there are no changes after this public hearing, the gross appropriation budget, which will be voted on at town meeting, will be $15,872,049, which would be an increase of 5.75% over the current year budget. This amount will be offset by budgeted revenue of $3,564,736, which is an increase of 6.1% over the current year revenue budget. Subtracting the budgeted revenue from the budget expense yields the amount to be raised by taxes of $12,313, an increase of 5.34%. Significant items that contributed to the increase include a 22% increase in the amount of the cost of health insurance, an increase of 3 staff in the fire and ambulance department, an increase invested in economic development, and the annual cost of living adjustment for the employees. In order to partially offset these increases, the board has made some difficult decisions. The budget does not include funding to replace the public works director, who is expected to retire in December 2025. Instead, the 3 superintendents, operations, water, and wastewater, will report directly to the town manager. The budget also does not include funding for the half-time code enforcement officer. This function will now be performed by the planning and zoning administrator with the assistance of the police department. Lastly, the amount set aside for the various reserve funds has been reduced by $155,000 from the current year. The board wasn't comfortable with these reductions, but felt it necessary to keep the amount to be raised by taxes staying. In addition, the board also voted to put forth an article for the citizens to vote on concerning the local option tax. The local option tax would add 1% onto the current room tax and the meal tax that is collected by the hotels and restaurants in our community. It is estimated that a local option tax, as proposed, will raise roughly $125,000, which would equate to 2 cents on the tax rate. If this was enacted, the amount to be raised by taxes would be reduced to $12,182,313, which would be an increase of 4.57% over the current year budget.
You've heard the presentation of the budget from the town manager, the expectations for next year, 2025, 2026. Does the public have any comments, or is there anyone that is wishing to speak towards the presentation? That includes those on Zoom. If anyone on Zoom would like to ask a question, you can unmute and speak or use your raise the hand option.
Hi. Hi. One thing we talked about the Budget Advisory Committee and others talked about is just creating like a 1-page document, which we've already started, to just clearly, succinctly kind of explain what the big budget items were that increased the budget this year and how the 1% tax local tax works. Just so we can maybe post it on the website, everybody understands it. It's 1-page, simple, visual, that I think will help. A bunch of us are working on it.
Recognizing Larry Kraft.
Thanks. So I have a question about code enforcement. This is the elimination of the position. That position replaced, previous to that position, the responsibilities fell to the planning administrator anyway, right? So, and then how different was it in terms of code enforcement, in terms of enforcement, with a code enforcement officer actually dedicated to that responsibility.
Yeah, when I became manager, the code enforcement officer actually reported directly to the town manager. And then we'd meet every couple of weeks over and talk about which properties he was looking at. Since probably the last 6 months, Chuck, the planning and zoning administrator, has been doing the code enforcement anyway. He said he sets aside time Friday mornings. He goes around and looks at the properties we receive complaints upon, and he does his follow-up his follow-up contacts. He's found so far that the assistance of the police department has been fantastic. People even though the tickets are the same, like the police officer or the code enforcement officer in as civil tickets, he finds that people are much more responsive to tickets received from the police department. So this is working. It's working well right now. Because the halftime person doesn't do a lot of work in the winter anyway, but Chuck has been allowed to slowly move that into his schedule, and he's been pleased with the results thus far.
So it's not like code enforcement's gone away. It's that position of code enforcement officer, which was an added position halftime.
Right. But there's a difference between the 20 hours of the halftime position and Chuck's maybe 4 hours if he works a half a day a week on.
Oh, that's true.
So the question might mean, how is that? You're saying it's working well, so I guess that's.
No, it is working well. Also, there's greater collaboration between code enforcement, the police department, as we talked about, also code enforcement and the health officer. Chuck is also a deputy health officer, as is John Claflin. And the health officer is Paul Steiner. But especially especially John Claflin and Chuck work well together, and they often places that have blight issues. Often it's tend to also have health issues. So we're recognizing that having the two people work together has so far been a success. We've made more progress.
Thanks. Other questions on the budget presentation? Is somebody on Zoom attempting to speak? Anyone on John Bond's name said ask me on mute.
Oh, that's for the
Cursor. That's what the cursor
happens to be.
Well,
Okay. Very good. Chuck, we're at a point where we had the budget presented by the town manager, and we're taking public questions on the budget. I don't know if you came prepared, if you have anything to add.
nothing there.
Okay, thank you. We only had a couple of questions, or one comment, one question, and we're getting ready to close this, and if there aren't any other questions or comments.
A question about the local option tax, and maybe somebody can answer the question, how many other towns are proposing that this year?
I don't know how many are proposing it this year.
How many have it now?
It's on the State Department website. I'd have to go. There's a number of them that have. Yeah, there's a number that have sales local option. So there's 4 categories: sales, alcohol, room, and board. So you can put it on too. The board is also resistant to add into the sales tax here. I'm being sensitive to our proximity to New Hampshire. But the theory is that the people who are going to the restaurants and going to the hotel, especially the hotels, are generally people that don't own property in Springfield. So it's a way of diversifying the revenue stream to protect the property tax on a little bit.
So that does sound like a question I'm thinking we should be a little better prepared to answer, especially as we move towards March and the vote. I'm sure Jeff is taking note of that, and we can have that information available.
And also, I mean, as the town manager said in his report, it reduces the tax burden on the local citizens. That's an important argument to make when you present this to the town, to the voters, yes.
And there is some argument that, instead of property tax money, we're looking for visitor money. And I know a lot of us attend restaurants locally, so we would be contributing additionally to that. It is only 1%. But the ones coming in from out of town, out of state, that are frequenting our restaurants or, what hotels we have or, Airbnbs, the short-term rental stuff would also be contributing, and that's typically not Springfielders. Johnston.
What is the process? Let's say it gets voted in. What is the process when it becomes effective? And are we going to coordinate that process to go along with our budget year or calendar year type thing?
It actually should work out pretty well. If the town does vote positively on local option tax, there's, the vendors have 90 days to work with state Department of Taxes to make sure that the systems are all set up. 90 days after March actually tends to line up pretty darn closely to our fiscal year starting July 1. So if it does pass it, it should align with our fiscal year pretty well. There may be a couple weeks, but I don't expect that to be an issue, but the timing is convenient.
If I can make a comment.
Mike?
So I will be, as a merchant, I will be one of those people affected by that. When I file my taxes monthly, my sales taxes, I have to declare if my town supports or doesn't support a local tax. So it is beholden on the individual to reply that. So the biggest challenge is for the town to make sure that the merchants that are affected by that are aware of that so that they can file. But I am required by law to certify that I do or do not have to pay that local tax. And my tax service actually tells me that I do, so.
32 towns.
Guys, I was gonna say.
You're wrong.
According to the May 2nd testimony of the VLCT to the House Ways and Means Committee.
But 32, they just have the room and board, but also have the.
Some form. There's two ways you can do it. You can do just the rooms and meals, or you can actually add to the sales tax as well.
The 32 has some version.
Some version, yeah.
Okay.
Other questions on Zoom land? I'm not seeing any. Other questions in person? Again, I am not seeing any. Tara, you're unmuted. Were you attempting to speak or is it you're just unmuted? Oh, there she goes. All right. Thank you. I didn't want to jump over you if you wanted to ask a question. Okay. If there aren't, last call, if there aren't any other questions, Zoom participants or in person, we will close the public hearing. Therefore, I'll determine that the public hearing is closed at 6:30. That brings us up to our regular session this evening, and the first order of business is to do the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we'll continue on roll call, starting on my left. Michael Martin, Christy Morris.
Tara Chase.
Michael.
That is 5 present, recognizing the absence of our school board liaison this evening. First order of business is to adopt the regular select board meeting minutes of December 23rd, as well as the budget workshop minutes of December 23rd, and a special meeting that we can have conducted on February 6th. I'll entertain a motion.
I move the adoption of the December 23rd regular budget and special hearing on January 6th.
I'll second.
Thank you, members. We do have a motion and seconded to approve the minutes as printed and distributed. Are there any corrections, errors, or omissions noted? Heather?
I have a couple little ones. Who am I talking to? You? Everyone? Anyone?
Yeah.
The machine? All right, on page 7 of 9, or in the PDF, page 9, it says Heather Fern requested discussion of creating a subcommittee under the local housing to address workforce housing. I think I said Heather requests a discussion on creating an ad hoc committee to address workforce housing. The next one was on page 18 of the PDF. We said Heather argued that Springfield needs to invest in economic development to compete with smaller towns. I'm not sure I said that. So I just strike that. And then on page 20 of the PDF. In the motion, I maybe I got this wrong, but I don't feel like somewhere along the way we started with 100 for economic and then we developed it to 70. But I don't see that in the notes. I only see 100, but I could be missing it. So I'm just going to check that. I only saw 100.
So I'll make sure that Carrie gets those.
Yeah. Thanks.
I believe it's on page 6 of the set of minutes. Top of the page, it's 100,000. The second paragraph, it drops to 50. And then if you continue on reading at the motion, I believe it was you, Mike, that we took back our original motions
Right.
and added it back in
I just couldn't
for
find it.
70 with the intention that if we received a $30,000 grant, that would be applied.
Yeah, I just can't find that motion. But those are my 3.
That happens on page 5.
Yeah. It's their fault.
We'll discuss potentially
Oh, I
compromising.
see it. Yeah,
somebody.
thank you.
Are there any other corrections, errors, or omissions noted?
Yep.
So,
Pete Christie.
go ahead.
Okay, on the Shar Osterlin Springfield, on the January 6th meeting minutes, it says that I was present via Zoom. I was not present. I was at another meeting. I was definitely not present at that meeting. And
Thank you, Sharon.
And I don't know if I can add this, but I think maybe there's another person who had told me that she couldn't make any meetings. So I'm not sure about the other people, but I think there might be one other person who also did not attend that meeting. And I don't know what to, I didn't have time to contact.
I think you're talking about Kathleen, and I'll check with Kathy.
Yeah, I don't think she was at the meeting. I could be.
Okay, thank you.
No, I think you're right.
Yeah.
Chairman,
Like Martin.
and maybe somebody can educate me. The lady who runs our housing authority, is her name Lauren or Laura? Laura, okay, on page 8 of the minutes of December 23rd, regular meeting. We should correct the name Lauren to Laura. Yeah.
And we had a couple of stags in there, when they're going to the chief stag, or chief stagner, but we know who it is.
You're wearing off on these people, Walter.
Any
Thank
other
you.
corrections, errors, or omissions? Not seeing or hearing of any. All of those, we'll take a roll call to approve the motion and seconded, we approve the minutes as printed and distributed, with the updates and corrections. Starting on my left, with Heather Frank.
Aye.
Mike Martin.
Aye.
Christie Moore says aye. Tara Chase.
Aye.
And Mike Schmidt.
Aye.
That is 5 in the affirmative. We are so approved. Do we have any requested additions to the agenda this evening?
I do not.
Moving on, new business, item number 1, brownfield discussion with Tom Kennedy.
Yeah, Walter Martone is our liaison to the Mount Scotty Regional Commission. And he thought it would be appropriate to have a session on brownfield so that, Tom could update us. Walter and I both also serve on the brownfield subcommittee of Mark. I get this. It's a tough thing. Anyway, Tom Kennedy is here from Mark to discuss our brownfield situation in Springfield and the surrounding area. And he brought his wingman with him, Bob Clark from SRPC and Dan Voisin, who was here for 5 o'clock meeting also from Stone Environmental. So
before I begin, let me give you a list of brownfield projects that we have funded over the last 20 years.
Thanks, sir.
These are the ones in Springfield.
These are all in Springfield. These are not all over the North.
That was so too short.
Thank you. So for the record, my name is Tom Kennedy. I'm the Director of Community Development for Mount Scotty Regional Commission. And the Regional Planning Commission back in the late 1990s made their first application to the Environmental Protection Agency to get brownfield funded. And we started out with assessment funding. And I believe our first projects was JNL1 to start to do the assessment. Their is basically when you do an assessment, there's 2 things you have to do a phase 1 and you look at ownership and you look at the property, and the phase 2 starts to look at what's going on within the property. And from that, and I'm going to be very general here, Dan is going to have to hold his ears in the generalization. And from that, we go to what we call a CAF, or corrective action plan. There's lots of steps in between this. We have been very successful over the years, and we then apply for what we call revolving loan fund monies, which we use those funds to clean up properties. We presently have about $3.5 million in revolving loans that we got. That's our most recent grant. And of that, we probably have about around $1.2 million remaining. We will be applying for additional revolving loan fund money. Under the Biden administration, they've loosened up a little bit, but generally speaking, when you get revolving loan fund monies, 50% of it have to go to a loan. 50% of it can be what we call sub-granted, which you can just give it away. As we move forward, and those of us who have been in government a long time understand that the federal largesse that we have seen over the last 12 years is going to come to an end. And so these fundings, we've been very, very successful with getting funding. I don't know the exact number better than I, but we also at JNL one, when you saw we took down the building, we got a special grant from the state of Vermont. We call it a Barrett grant, and we got $5.1 million to do that. To try to get, so Springfield has the honor of having the most brownfield per square foot than any other town in the state in the 1990s. We probably have some of the largest, most contaminated buildings remaining in the state. So the expense associated with us trying to clean up these sites is phenomenal. Right now, as you all know, through the actions of the town, as our Springfield Regional Development Corporation got the Parks and Wilson building. We have just started that project, And we have spent in our fund, $177,000 in assessment. The state of Vermont has spent well over $50,000. And this is just assessment. We haven't gotten to a corrective action plan yet. We haven't done a building stability study yet. We haven't done hardly anything. Okay. So these things are very, very expensive, which is my segue into what we want to do and what the Regional Planning Commission is now going to be. We're going to be developing a priority on what projects we're going to fund and which we are not, because there's just not enough money to fund everything. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm here, and I'm here with my colleagues, is that we just all need to work together to try to come up with that. It also helps us when we are making applications for federal and state funds. I'm remiss to not say the Agency of Commerce and Community Development in Vermont and the Department of Environmental Conservation, they also have brownfield programs. The Agency of Commerce and Community Development has a loan program of their own, and they also have a through the legislature and really the committee that Christie is on. There's an assessment program that goes directly to regional planning commissions in the state, where we work with the towns directly for assessment. The Department of Environmental Conservation, in the last legislative session, they got, I think it was $5 million in assessment funds. So the money is, we're fortunate in Vermont is we have some money, but the projects are large and they're expensive. Is here, people have questions. Here.
Sure. Mike. Yeah.
All my comments.
Thanks for coming, Tom. Looking at this list here, are these all in process, or are they completed, or what's the status of these projects that you've got listed here?
Well, we can, if you want, we can go down the list.
Yeah.
The two Main Street projects are close to completed. They're completed.
Yeah.
Bryant's is not. Two Falls is not. We're having some ownership issues there. Obviously, J01, Park Street, 100 River Street, Edgar May, Jones are not completed. Jones Center is completed. 1620 Park Street is completed. Wilson Block is completed. Artisan Surfaces, for those, that's now LBL.
Yeah.
That is completed. And then, as I just mentioned, Parks and Wilson. And I'm sure there may be a couple of small ones that I've missed on this list, but these are the large ones.
And just to try to understand the scope of the problem, you have other projects within your jurisdiction that are also brownfields, and some of these are just in the assessment stage, like the Parks and Wilson one. We don't have a corrective action plan yet. That's the next step, I would assume. And there's funds required to do that. Do you have funds to do the CAP for Parks and Wilson?
Yes.
But you don't know what the cost of remediation is until you've actually done the plan. And so
let me also say, because I know with the J01 and Dan is here, it is an incredibly complex process because of the plumes and things like this that are coming off-site, and just trying to figure out how to address those. And so glad Dan is here. He can certainly answer some of those questions, but it's very, very expensive.
So those are two great interests to us. Jones and Lamson Plant 1. So we have a CAP for the second phase of slab removal.
No, we do not.
We do not, but we've completed all of the borings and testing.
That's correct.
So is it your firm that's doing the CAP?
Yes.
And where are we in that process?
We expect to have a cap within 4 to 6 months.
4 to 6 months. And then we go look and see if we can get approval to that, right? You have to have
a
it.
final cap within 4 to 6 months.
Yeah. The EPA has to sign off for that as well as the
DEC
DEC.
signs off on the corrective action plan. That's of the sites, it's probably the biggest one I'm aware of.
Yeah.
But as far as the EPA TSCA division, which is the portion of EPA that manages the commerce and disposal of PCBs, has a say in how that site gets cleaned up. And their process includes several different types of plans. We'll keep it like, but that plan is yet to hit the regulators, and that's gonna take a while.
Yeah.
So you bring up as the corrective action plan, and then we can start with it.
And then you go to EPA and they apply their process to that. And then after that process is complete, then you'll know how much it's going to cost.
No, we'll know when the cap is written.
Yeah, the cap will be right.
Right. Yeah. Well, to your plan, but not necessarily to the EPA's satisfaction. There might be
Those two plans should be handbook.
Yeah, they should.
Okay. And it includes the cap, the first crack at the costing, we'd actually provided some back of envelope calculations so far to Bob and Tom about, so they can start to put together a plan for the region. But the first real crack is development of the evaluation of corrective action alternatives, which is the step one of the remedial planning process. So before even we draft the cap, there's another document that gets shoehorned into between the assessment and the cap. That gives you a kind of a first pass at the cost relative, order of magnitude level of costs. And then we get into the corrective action planning where we put engineered designs to paper and we start to do some real cost estimating that is like detailed of the selected remedy. The EGA evaluates the alternatives for cleaning up the site with cost being one of the factors. There's several others that get evaluated, but then the corrective action plan is taking the selected remedy and providing the cost for it. So it's start to get real numbers in the cap.
Yeah. So of all these projects that are not complete, do they have caps for all of them except for the Parks and Wilson obviously does not have one, and Jones and Lamson Plant 1 does not have one. The other projects all have corrective action plans.
A point of clarity on that. So the brownfield process itself allows for remedial planning and implementation per the development timeline that is supporting the development timeline. So within JNL, we've been able to take like little bites of the apple along the way. So the demolition was done under a cap.
Yeah.
A partial cap.
Yeah.
There's another partial cap that's in front of the regulators now for cleaning up what we call the NAPL area of concern in the back. There's 17 areas of concern at the site. And that's part of the problem is that it's extremely complex. There's many overlapping areas of concern, but one of which is the bunker oil that is behind the building and was released from a 70,000 gallon tank back there.
Yeah.
So that cap is in front of regulators for approval, and we expect it probably in the next couple of months to have approval to implement that for spring of 2025. The cap to remove the slab and all of the areas of concern that reside below the slab, and there are many, will hopefully be done in 4 to 6 months.
And then the plan is to phase the removal of the slab. But we're not going to remove everything all in one shot. It's too expensive and the like. So that's what we're working on right now. We're also working on the potential of getting some additional, what is the monies that we did the demolition, I said it was called BARA money, and we may be able to get access to some additional BARA money to continue there.
Yeah. That's BARA.
BERA.
BERA. And you've done some back of napkin or back of envelope calculations. Is there a back of envelope calculation for this entire list?
No.
Do you have a back of envelope?
You don't, Mike, you don't want to know.
I mean, how many tens of millions of dollars are we talking about here?
Well, you got to clarify he's talking about his money. Many of these have money far beyond what the regional planning commission's provided, be it state or EPA. So, I mean, J&L, you guys have earned for several hundred, but we've gotten millions from other sources.
And the other thing, and again, I'm being very broad, cleanup is based on use and depending on the kind of use you're going to have with the property. If your cleanup's going to be you're knocking down a building and you're going to have a park, that might be cheaper than saying you're going to have a daycare center there, for instance. So it's really hard for us to give you an estimate what everything costs. But Bryant's, Parks and Wilson, J&L, one. We're getting a pretty good handle on Berkeley School. Those three are going to be they're quite expensive, multiple millions of dollars.
Now, I worked at a project at the 100 River Street, and that's a contaminated site. Stone Environmental had done some of the work for that project. And one of the things I found that was unique was that when we did the work there, we had to, I think there was a 21-page document, which was the instructions for how to proceed with any kind of building modifications associated with they had entombed basically the floor with an overpour of concrete and a plastic membrane, and the walls were all painted with some kind of epoxy paint. And if we drilled a hole in the wall, we had to collect all of the dust and bag it and had to have it manifested and disposed of properly.
And tested.
Yeah, and tested, yeah. And yet that building still stands with all of its contamination in place. In some respects, I mean, it's just been capped over in epoxy, I don't know how bad the contamination is, but there is that possibility, but not for J&L.
So the difference being is that building was heated. And the roof drains were left in place. So when you stop heating a building and you need to disconnect storm drains, you freeze and you put ponds of water on the roof and your roof fails. And that's what happened at J&L, and that's what's happening at Bryant's. And when those two things happen, you start to have a major issue with the structural integrity of the building. And so that's, I think that of all what I've seen in the brownfield process, that's probably the beginning of the end for many buildings is when you turn off the heat and you start to lose the structural integrity. And so at J&L, with a roof failure, what we had to do was condemn the building to allow for it to come down in a way. It was called a bulk loadout. If you have a asbestos containing material throughout a building, the Department of Health requires you to, and the building's salvageable or structurally has some integrity, you need to abate it before you demolish it. So it's incredibly expensive to do it that way. And at J&L, it was cheaper to demolish it the way we did as a bulk loadout than it would have been if we abated it first and then demolished it if it was in good condition. But that's what we have at J&L, actually is a cheaper product than we would have.
Also, all apples and oranges too, because the number of different contaminants on J&L is more than 100 River Street.
Yeah.
But some of the levels at 100 River Street were much higher than J&L and PCBs, for example. So where you parked the Great Hall, that had to be demoed because of conduit underneath what was the building. That was greased in World War II with a particularly toxic grease. There's more of that conduit still under parts of that building that will have to be dealt with at some point. The 100 River Street's not done. Just the parts of the building that were in use are done, but there's more building that still presumably wants to be redeveloped. And there will be brownfield costs associated with
the
that.
starting point of when that building was starting to get redeveloped was a higher quality building. There was the roof had a few leaks here and there, but they were contained under like a lot of hard work by Ted Foster, our friend Ted Foster, that contained those leaks and is able to keep it from impacting the building and rotting other parts of the structure. And that's, I think it's no real exaggeration to say Ted Foster saved the building.
So I guess my big picture question is like, when you said collaborate with the town and that's everybody collaborating, but who owns trying to decide where the resources go based on, the town plan, the strategic plan, the funding, the other funding available, like who is that voted on? Is that recommendations coming from SRDC or Mark, or how do we tackle this, I guess?
It's a very good question. So if the Regional Planning Commission is the applicant for the federal funding, in the end, the Regional Planning Commission is going to make the decision on how they spend these funds that they applied for. And Walter and Jack have been on, we had this, what we call Brownfield Steering Committee, and they're looking for input. We talk about things. One of the reasons why we're here tonight is to say we also need the town, the board, should be providing either input to Jack or others. So I'm not answering your question. I understand it because we're not there yet.
Okay.
But what I am saying is that we all need to work together. SRDC, the Mount Scotty Regional Commission, the town, and to put our heads together. The other thing is if, it is clear to even the state of Vermont and the legislature that here's our goal, here's our priority, we're putting it together. And then you get to the whole other part of it is the economic development part of it as well is, where are we going to get the capital? I mean, because that is going to be one of the things that the Regional Planning Commission is going to start to look for is who's in the wings, what are you thinking you want to do? Many of these sites is way too premature to decide what you're going to do. We use Parks and Wilson, for example. We have no idea what the structural integrity of that building is. So that is going to be happening over the winter with a different environmental group. From that, you can get a better idea of what is going to remain and not remain. And please chime in on this, Bob. I mean, so that's where we're at.
And just to clarify your point is, I'm going to use Parks and Wilson's. If Parks and Wilson, we said, we have a developer that wants to do middle income housing there. If it's all feasible, that would kind of raise that particular project up on your list.
Excellent.
So would it make sense that the town or SRDC or whomever kind of starts looking for suitors or in 2026 and 2025 or how would that work?
I'd say that we are and we do. There also needs to be, use JNL as an example. JNL best case scenario is usable in 2026, 2027 maybe, so we talk to people all the time and JNL is easily the site that gets the most interest to our office. Does that mean somebody's going to write a check 3 years out? Probably not. We have companies that are conceptually interested and would like to know when the site's available. Some of them are the things the community would like. Some are things the community probably isn't so interested in. So, as we get through these steps, as we get through the next level of the cap, and as we know that, all right, we can take up the slab in this part, then we get a little more serious about finding a development partner. We've been kind of cultivating several for the past few years. And looking at, okay, we're going to build a building of this size, and these are some of the people we're going to talk to about it.
And Bob, are those mostly for commercial space or is it also for housing development or?
Doing housing at JNL is a non-starter.
Yes.
Or just in general?
Our focus on JNL is commercial industrial.
But I mean, so again, I'm going to use Parks and Wilson. Does your office get requests or ask about housing development? Or does that, if someone's interested in being a housing developer in Springfield?
I had an inquiry today about somebody looking for, but what they're doing is looking for money. They're not looking for properties to develop, they're looking for money.
To develop.
Yes.
Yeah.
I had one 2 hours ago.
So Heather, it's okay.
Yeah.
that's why I'm here tonight, because what we're gonna do is we're gonna be having this analysis done. And after we have this analysis done, we're gonna know what we have, and I'm gonna use Parks and Wilson. And it could be, someone may say, oh, I want it to be a restaurant. Someone say, I want it to be a housing. This is where, as a team, we decide what we want to do, and we need to decide in a manner that's realistic. In that, where can we, one of the things we've always struggled here is capital and attracting and having capital. So, it's like you said, the town decides, yes, we want to do a housing project there. Then I'll be at work, Bob will be at work, people in town will be at work, and we can try to find someone who may want to develop that site for housing. They're out there. The people are out there. But once we start to get closer and closer to cleanup, we want to start to see interest, and not just someone where we as a public entity is providing all the equity.
Right.
We're not doing that.
Right.
Thanks. Jeff. Well, one of the things to make clear is we don't have the structural analysis on Parks and Wilson.
Right.
It could be that it's not structurally sound, then we run into some severe limitations, and we may not be able to build there at all.
Right.
So it's a little premature to try to find partners yet.
That's right.
When you don't know you're gonna have any, if you don't know.
Yeah, and that's why I said after we do all the analysis and we start, again, like as I said earlier, cleanup is based on use. And so, we need to figure out, based on all this analysis, what are the potential uses for the site? And people like Dan go to work and they come up with a corrective action plan.
Mike?
Yeah, and based on what you said, then the type of cleanup that we would do would be based on the structural analysis. If the building was going to be raised, the cleanup is a different process than if the building was going to be sound, obviously.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so you can't establish a corrective action plan until you know that. And then the second piece is the use of the building. So if it's going to be used for one thing, your process will allow you to do to a certain level, whereas a different use would require either more or less work. So when is the structural engineering going to be complete on that building?
Oh, completed, I don't know, they're gonna be starting in the next couple of months.
Yeah.
And I know,
Because that's part of the scope.
part of the scope. So Weston Sampson is the firm that's doing that work.
Yeah.
And they have been talking to, and so we've run out of money for assessment. And so we're now partnering with the Department of Environmental Conservation, and they've taken over funding the project. And they have agreed to fund it through assessment, which is great.
Yeah.
It's just great. So, and it's not going to be an easy choice. I think we're going to find that part of the building is structurally sound, part of it isn't. The other thing, just to prepare you, there's a lot of stuff inside that building that is not hazardous, and it's going to be expensive to get rid of it. Really expensive.
So just for clarification, 1620 Park Street, was that 16?
-20.
I think I was writing down.
For my secretarial skills.
No, that's fine. I was talking during or
Yeah.
writing.
Bottom of the hill there.
Yeah.
The old Kyle building.
Oh, that's Park Place?
It's still 16 to 20, no matter who
Yeah.
came upon.
Yeah.
There's a Kyle, before, many years ago, that's where the police station was, down underneath from Factory Street.
Down the street.
Down the street.
Well, it's in the same structure, it's just you had access from.
No.
That's not,
That's not?
that's its own building, the port on the third floor. Police department was on the second floor, and then they had a roof, I guess, from the water going into the basement, big jail cells that are clean.
Okay,
There are some of us that were in that building.
It's part of your Factory Street parking.
yeah, thank you.
Another question, how does it work? Because a lot of these buildings are owned by SRDC, but like 100 Rivers privately owned. So how does that work? Because they are going to want to do what they want to do.
So the model we have been using here is that a community usually finds a you take a building in taxes or something like that, and it goes to SRDC, which is a nonprofit. Because SRDC is a nonprofit, we can provide grant funds.
But so when 100 River was done, that's what happened. We had title, Persian Valley Development Corporation owned the building, which was us. And so we did a lease to purchase with the developers, and that's what did the cleanup work that's happened to date. We'll likely do the same thing at Chandler and so forth.
So but the rest of it that's still not clean. The private.
100 River Street?
Yeah, the private owner, it's up to them to.
It's now up to them.
I see. Oh, and is anybody else? Does that come to the house too?
Concrete is
private?
private,
So-
and that would always be private.
So that's up to them.
But again, that's on ownership, and I really can't get into that. It's just, they allowed us to do what phase one.
Well, I just asked,
Or part of phase two.
I just asked because that's, the town can't influence those two. As if when we're thinking about our town plan, those two are kind of off. Unless we talk to the private owner.
I think that there are things the municipalities can do to kind of foster it. You can, think about how you're doing your zoning, your tax, forgiveness or water bills. There's any number of things that you can do to kind of help foster it. And just being creative and make a building more attractive. I mean, you could have a tax stabilization for JNL, for instance, or you could do water discounts or whatever. But like in Montpelier, we were involved with the project, the Caledonia Spirits site, the Bar Hill Gin, if you could be familiar with that. That project received an allotment of water treatment for its effluent from the city. That made it so they could didn't have to do on-site treatment of the effluent from the distillery. They're going to be phasing that treatment in to the facility over time. I think it's actually already in, but when that project was up and running, it had directed effluent to the city wastewater treatment plant. But so there's a lot of things you can do to kind of help foster those businesses getting up off the ground that need it.
Walter.
I'm thinking of some examples, one of which was at the Brownfields Committee, but one thinking as theoretical. Could a private developer decide they are going to acquire a building and they're going to do this on their own?
Yes.
Like, for example, I don't know if it was on your list or not, but it's the community center, a potential brownfield site. And maybe someone wants to buy it. And I mean, it was attached to Lovejoy and it was part of JNL originally. If that's the case, could they then apply for the funding and do the brownfield remediation? They may not personally do it. They may have to contract with a qualified contractor like yourself. But they can do the whole thing themselves. And they're eligible for these funds from the state, from the feds, from. So it depends. Another one that was the Bennington School that we just had come before the private corporation that was formed.
But it's a nonprofit.
No, it's a nonprofit. But I would think more likely something like the community center might be attractive to a developer, but they may want to do the whole thing themselves. Contracting with licensed.
So the access to the money, if you're from the Brella program, we have a lot of acronyms, so sorry about this, but the Brownfield program in the state of Vermont is referred to as Brella, and I'm not going to spell the acronym, but to enroll, there's two different ways you get into the program. You can be a bona fide prospective purchaser or an innocent current owner, right? And so with that, the better liability protection and benefit to the enrollee is if you're going in as a bona fide prospective purchaser. So you enter before, you do due diligence before, you do your phase one, you're off to the races. And that affords you access to revolving loan fund. You do not have access to revolving loan fund if you enter Brella as an innocent current owner. You still can get liability protection if you clean up the site and complete all the requirements that the DEC sets forward, but you don't have access to free money, free or cheap money. Private developers, commercial developers do not have access to free money except for the one-time stimulus money that came out of A&R back in 2020.
The other thing is, they don't have to work with us, but we always caution potential purchasers just to talk to us. We can certainly put people in touch with, people like Dan or whatever. But, if the model of forming a nonprofit first and then selling it, the access to cheaper capital is so great, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I also would just caution people, especially in certain parts of Springfield, it's going to be really, you want to know what studies are out there. I mean, some of these studies now are they're paper studies in our library at work. So it's hard sometimes to get access to these things, is that we have maybe studies that could inform you as far as your purchase is concerned. And when you're forming like a P&S or something like that. But
Another thing to take advantage of that Bob as a Economic Development Corp and the Regional Planning Commission and municipality can do is so-called RTC exemption, which allows entities like municipalities and Regional Planning Commission to take title for the purpose of receiving a cleanup grant. And then you therefore don't get any of the liability associated with the property, but you can apply for it and get cleanup grants. EPA would be one of them. As Tom mentioned, the EPA money could be drying up pretty quick, but at least for the time being, they're being very generous with their EPA cleanup grants. And you could spend down the grant and then set up the property to be positioned to be sold to a private entity as a cleaner or clean site.
Which is what we've done with Parks and Wilson.
Right.
We have the RPC exemption.
Yep. Shar Osterlin.
Yeah, the word or acronym CAP has been used a number of times, and as a member of the public, I'm not sure what that means. Can that be explained?
Corrective action plan, which is basically how you're going to clean up the bad stuff.
Okay, and the other question is, the select board members seem to be looking at a list of the brownfield properties. Can that list be made available to the public? I didn't see it in the packet. So maybe in the minutes, that list of brownfield properties could be attached.
of course, sure. Yes.
And the other thing is, oops, I'm sorry, this is the last question. It's a short answer one. Do you anticipate less money from the federal government with the new administration?
I'm an optimistic fellow. There's my understanding is there is a considerable amount of EPA money that they have now. I think it will be what we call clawing back, and it depends on how much the next administration claws back some of these other funds. And when claw back, meaning monies that they could have they allocated to them, they take it back because it hasn't been spent. But brownfields is economic development, and so generally speaking, administrations that we be a Democratic or Republican usually have supported it. Never to the extent the way the Biden administration did with all this post-COVID monies. And if you really want to get into acronyms, I can throw out those acronyms. So that's why we're trying to apply for additional funds in March for our revolving loan.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jennifer Nelson, you had your hand up. It's down now. Did you have a question or did it get answered?
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm just curious to know about a list or if there was a map somewhere of the brownfields in the area. But I think Char asked that question.
Yes, he did, and we'll make sure that that's up on the website in the minutes. It was handed out this evening at the meeting from Mount Escutney Regional Commission.
So I would caution that's a list of known brownfields. There likely are other properties in the community that could very well be brownfields.
And some privately funded.
Privately funded, that's right.
And
These are projects that the Mount Escutney Regional Planning Commission has worked on and has provided funding. Okay, there are known brownfield sites in town that have chosen not to participate. in our program.
The police station is completed, so
Right.
that's completed. But
I'm thinking we may want some explanation too, as you got activity here and a supplemental cleanup, phase 2, phase 1, 2. We might want a little explanation as to what the status is. And you went down through that, but we probably should identify what that is.
I don't want to take too much of your time, but we can go through some of it now, or we could, for tonight's meeting, I just thought I'd try to give you a list of what has been going on in this community. We sometimes hear, well, what have you been doing? And so that's all I was really trying to do. We can, if you would like to invite us back, or I can draft something that goes through this. I tried to start to do it this afternoon. It gets very complex very quickly, and I just didn't want to confuse people. So but we can go through that if you like.
That'd be great.
Okay. Other questions before we move on? Walter.
Just very quickly, so if someone were to acquire.
Wait a minute. I know you. No. You mentioned the word quickly.
So if someone were to acquire a property, is there some process whereby before they can do any development of it, they have to declare that they haven't checked to see whether it's a brownfield? Or do they have to provide some documentation that they have? Or can they just redevelop their property?
if you are very risk unadverse, you like risk, you could buy a property and develop it tomorrow. But you're not going to avoid liability going forward, and it would be very, very risky.
And so those banks will not allow you to take a mortgage without you doing what we call phase one.
You'd have to have your own pile cash.
So you have to fund it yourself.
Even if you're instantly buying something that's nowhere near a factory or anything.
So you assume the liability. You could potentially assume the liability.
In Vermont, the liability upon discovery of release falls to the landowner. That's the way it's written in the statute. So if somebody were to discover a release that comes off of your property that you just bought and thinking it was clean and they identify it, they would be coming after you, even if you didn't cause it.
Right.
So upon discovery of the release. There are funds available for private homeowners for environmental cleanup though.
So, yep. Petroleum cleanup fund comes to mind when you have an oil leak.
Oil spills.
Yep.
But that's pretty much it.
Yeah, well.
There's a little bit of assessment related to living.
Yeah.
Right.
From an industrial site, there's all sorts of chemicals involved, but from a homeowner site, it's generally an oil tank that's had an accidental release. And there is a petroleum cleanup fund that handle that. To a certain degree.
Other questions?
I should put a plug in for Park Street. I mean, all the work going on right now, you're probably several $100,000 in so far. For what will be probably $1.2, $1.3 million environmental cleanup as part of the redevelopment of that site. So asbestos remediation inside the building is fairly close to completion. I think we've got another month or so. And then all the digging outside will include the removal of so-called urban soils as we reconfigure that into a cohesive parking lot, which, by the way, would have use for potential future use of Parks and Wilson, as in addition to what we're doing at Park Street School. So we are working together on that, different environmental firm, but that's an active project going on in the year.
Well, again, Park Street School, so can the school district be held responsible? They sold it to you.
Well, I mean, if you want to play that game, we could also chase
I'm just
that.
curious.
Well, so we did a phase one, we're umbrella. We're getting these funds to do this because we're shielded in theory from the liability of it. If I'm not an attorney, I'm not going to go down that road.
Okay. I'm not saying that you would ever want to do that.
Yeah, I mean, there's, and I'm in a public meeting, but there's a conversation and a rabbit hole to go down about the people who caused the contamination of these sites. We have explored that rabbit hole. It's beyond the capacity of SRDC to go down that rabbit hole. We explored it several times. You know, and also we tied up for more years, you know, so it is something.
Perfect. Other questions? If not, I want to thank you gentlemen for coming in.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Sharing with us the information.
Thank you.
Good to see you.
Act on the budget and move articles to the warrant.
Okay, yeah, this item's on the agenda so the board can take action on the budget. Should there be any changes as a result of the public hearing? In addition, the board needs to move the local option tax question to the warrant. I do want to note that there's a typo in the proposed motion. It should say general fund, not general found. That's why I was say that before Mike mentioned it.
Walter?
And you missed it there.
So first, I'd like a motion to set the gross appropriation. Budget to be voted on at $15,872,049.
$15,872,049. Yes, please.
I'll make a motion.
I'll second.
Yeah, we do have a motion and seconded to approve the 25-26 gross appropriation for the town budget at $15,872,049. Is there any discussion surrounding that motion? I just had one quick comment. I think people may not know, but when this was put forth after the budget adjustments at our last meeting, I had voted no against it. And but at this point in time, I lost that race. And as chair, we need to promote a budget for the town of Springfield in the ensuing year. And so I will be voting in favor of this. And if there aren't any other comments, again, I'd like to thank the Budget Advisory Committee, the board members, and the town manager for getting us to this point. It does represent a 5.75 increase over the current year. But we have revenues that were increased. So the expectations are that the net increase would be 5.34%. But we have to vote on a gross appropriation. And if there aren't any comments from those on Zoom participants or in the audience. Seeing none, hearing none, I'll call for the vote, starting on my left. Heather Frame.
Aye.
Mike Martin. Aye. Christy Moore says aye. Tara Chase.
Aye.
And Mike Schmidt. Aye. That is 5 in the affirmative. And it is, we have set our budget.
So next week, there's a proposed motion for the local option tax question. If the board still supports it, I'd like a motion to move the proposed motion to the warrant. And the motion is in here with the typo fixed.
Chairman.
Mike Martin.
Yeah, I move that we add the following language to the warrant for town meeting. Shall the town authorize the assessment of a 1% local option tax on rooms and meals pursuant to 24 VSA section 138, the proceeds of which shall be applied as a general fund revenue to reduce the municipal tax rate.
I second.
So we do have a motion and seconded to approve the town warrant, the 1% local option tax on rooms and meals. Is there more discussion on that motion?
I do have a question. I am in favor of this. It says rooms and meals.
Right, per statute, yeah.
Is that coffee shops? Is that Dunkin' Donuts? Is that?
It's the one with, it depends, if sales tax is not included, so if you pay 6% sales tax, it's not gonna affect you. Or if you collect 6% sales tax.
Right.
If you collect the 9% meal tax or the 9% room tax, it will affect you.
Oh, then I vote yes. Sorry, I support it either way.
Other discussion from board members? Not seeing any comments from the audience.
I have a question. Was there ever a discussion about the revenue from this tax being in addition to what's being? We talked during the public hearing that the revenue from the local option tax would offset and reduce the taxes. It could, and that's written into the motion, into the warrant, that it would offset the taxes. Could it be, is there a possibility that it could be used in addition to? So we pay our taxes and then we pay and then we also collect the local option tax, which would give the town even more money to spend on its various projects and enterprises.
It is a separate warrant article, so we're.
No, but it's gonna offset taxes rather than be additional revenue.
It'll be revenue.
You mean dedicate the proceeds of this to?
Beyond that the proceeds of this tax is revenue beyond the I don't even know if that's, I'm just asking, so.
It counts as revenue, if I'm not mistaken.
It does count as revenue, but not additional revenue, is what you put.
Right, I'm just asking, could it be, is it?
This is the wording that was approved, with the LCT, and I don't know, I didn't ask that question.
Yeah.
But the wording where the towns have used it in the past has always been to reduce.
So, I'm not saying that's a bad idea, I'm just saying if you're looking for revenue, you know.
The answer to your question is perhaps, but that's not our intent.
And my comment is maybe it should be.
Other comments from the audience, including Zoom participants. Not seeing any. So with that said, I'll call for the roll, starting on my left. Heather Frank.
Aye.
Mike Martin. Aye. Christie Moore says aye. Tara Chase.
Aye.
And Mike Schmidt.
I
wasn't even reluctant, like.
Once he found that.
I collect 6%, so I'm.
Okay, also lastly, the board approved the list of special appropriations last week. At that time, Barbara Cushing noted there was still one petition outstanding. The petition has been submitted and approved. Springfield Area Parent Child Center will have a question on the ballot for $5,000, just so you're aware that is done. And also we received a language for the SAPA question for $10,000. It's been approved by Steve today, correct? I don't know. Okay. I thought you had it, so. I don't want to kill any more trees than necessary.
Do you want to take these one at a time?
I don't think you need to. You have to do this one because the board put this one as not by division, but you do have to approve this one.
Yeah, this is your motion.
So this is the proposed motion that's been approved also by Steve Ankuda. Shall the town vote to appropriate the sum of $10,100 to offset Springfield area public access TV's operating costs to record, broadcast, archive, and promote up to 25 select board meetings, up to 25 school board meetings, the annual town meeting, and the outreach work it does to promote government transparency, media literacy, and community connection in our community.
So moved.
I'll second.
We do have a motion and seconded to approve the $10,000 appropriation for SAPA TV. And that is for the recording of our minutes or meetings, as well as the school board and other governmental events. Will the school be contributing towards this, or is it strictly the town?
This is an appropriation, so it's not on either.
Yeah, not on either side. Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah. We're gonna get that question.
Okay.
Either way. Your discussion on the motion.
I do believe to that discussion, there is the same request to the school board.
No, only this board can put the items on the warrant. This isn't being charged to the school budget.
Okay.
It's a special appropriation.
Okay.
So the total for all of them is like 230,000-ish.
So
218 plus 10.
10
plus
plus
five.
5, so it's 232.
Yeah.
33.
33.
Thanks.
Other discussion on the SAPA TV $10,000 appropriation. Comments from the audience, including Zoom participants. Not seeing any attempt to speak or hands up. We'll call for the vote, starting on my left, Heather Fram.
Aye.
Mike Martin. Aye. Christy Moore says aye. Kyra Chase.
Aye.
And Mike Schmidt.
Aye.
That is 5 in the affirmative.
And you don't need a motion on the parent child center. That's a petition.
No, that's a petition.
Okay.
That'll go on at the petitions. The petition's in, so that's gonna go on automatically.
Yes.
Right.
And we approved the other 5 articles at our last meeting.
You approved them. You could consider that them being moved. Usually there's a movement with all the other articles where they're read and moved to the warrant.
We're gonna have a chance to sign this, aren't we?
Yes.
At the next meeting, yeah. Tuesday, Monday.
So that's when you guys, it's on for discussion.
So it'll be the 23rd, 27th. I mean, I can't be able to.
Your deadline's 29th, isn't it?
27th.
27th.
So we're gonna have a meeting next week.
We haven't got there yet.
Okay. Yeah.
That's my only comment was if any of those, if we did take a vote on those and any of them voted down, we would have to know that before our next meeting, so we can get the proper warrant, the ballot item.
It would be preferred if you move them all tonight. Then I'm good to go and get that in your packet. Or Monday if you're having Monday.
I think we moved them all.
I thought we did last week.
Yeah, I think it's, the word was you approved them.
Oh, okay.
Are you considering that being moved to the warrant? If so, I'm good with that.
That was our intent.
Yeah.
Okay. We're good.
I think the board intent is that we did.
Okay, awesome.
If you are unclear and want to rather see confirmation of that,
It's in the minutes.
so you're good.
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay. Excellent. Item number 3, discuss housing and the possible creation of an ad hoc committee.
Yes. Missing middle or workforce housing continues to be a serious concern for all of Vermont, including Springfield. It is also a priority in the town's strategic plan. Heather Frame has provided information on housing in the area, which are included in the packet, and makes the following recommendation. To establish an ad hoc middle income housing, MIH committee, to address 2 critical priorities: increasing the availability of middle income housing and expanding Springfield's grant list. According to the Mount Scottney Regional Commission, Mark, Springfield will require 513 new owner-occupied homes by 2030. With just 5 years to meet this target, immediate action is essential. The objective, the committee's primary objective is to develop a comprehensive plan to address Springfield's middle-income housing needs and align efforts with a long-term and economic growth goal, with long-term economic growth goals. The tasks. The committee will meet monthly to strategize and develop the comprehensive plan, using these sessions to evaluate successful initiatives from other towns and determine best practices. Members will work collaboratively to analyze housing gaps, identify potential solutions, and outline actionable steps to meet the projected needs for middle-income housing. Composition. The committee should include local and regional developers, the executive director of BRIC, a member of the long-term capital planning committee, town planning and zoning officer, and other relevant stakeholders to ensure a diverse perspective and expertise that to inform the process. Well, there's a lot of information.
Just a statement, it wasn't just me, Walter and Mike helped out a lot.
I'd like to move that the select board form an ad hoc committee for the purposes of investigating solutions to the housing crisis that we're experiencing in Springfield, particularly as it relates to the missing middle or workforce housing, middle income housing, as outlined in this proposal that we have in front of us.
I'll second that.
We do have a motion and seconded to approve the appointment of the ad hoc housing committee. I'm looking for the
Middle income.
Creation of an ad hoc committee for the purpose of housing.
Yeah, and just so everyone knows that the charter allows us to do this. The committee stands for 3 years as an ad hoc committee, unless it's reauthorized. The process would be that we would solicit from the public applications for the seats. We don't have to name the members of the committee tonight. So the next step would be that we would advertise that a new committee's been formed, and an outline of the committee as it's been presented, and request applications from interested people. Because we've specified in this document that there's certain people that we'd like to include, I guess we'll have to make a request to see if they're willing to do these things. Because it is their option. But and that would fall on the managers to do both those tasks. And then at some future meeting, we'll have applicants that we can approve for appointment to the committee.
And one other comment, I think I need to say this, Jeff, but I would recommend that it doesn't have to be just Springfield residents. We invite applications outside of Springfield also. And the executive director, Rick, has already agreed. So he's in.
We haven't received this application.
Well, verbally agreed.
I'm also, thank you for that. I'm also, I would also be interested in other housing partners. I know we didn't mention them specifically, such as Springfield Supportive Housing or Springfield Housing Authority or Wyndham Windsor. Others would, we would reach out to them to see if they would have interest.
The check, all hands on deck. And obviously the committee has been looking at our strategic plan relative to providing economic growth to the community and an increase in the grand list. It would help to support our goals of creating new employment opportunities if there were more employable people in the community. And what we found is that housing is a severe stumbling block. In our discussions, we talked to Amanda Seidler at the Sidler, excuse me, at the Working Communities Challenge program that has been handled by SRDC, and employers recognize the need for housing. And some of the organizations that we talked to, and what we found in the course of our discussions is that all of the money that's available is available strictly for affordable housing, low-income housing, not workforce housing. And it's our opinion that type of housing does not promote the grand list, does not provide additional bodies to support economic growth or employment. And so this is a Herculean task to try to find methods and avenues that we can employ to create a boom in middle-income housing construction. And there's tremendous obstacles, affordability being one of them, willing participants that have capital, another. And we're not sure exactly what our town can do, but we would like to have this committee investigate some possibilities and maybe come up with some actions that we can take as a municipal body to help ease this crisis. So that's the purpose of the motion. And the committee is going to have a big task to try to analyze the situation and come up with some solutions. Somebody's doing it someplace and we don't know exactly how, and we want to find that out. And I don't think we want to wait until somebody just happens to show up in Springfield and decide they're going to build a house. We want to encourage people to build houses in Springfield.
Other discussion on the motion? Comments? Recognizing Chuck Gregory.
Will members of the public be able to serve on this commission? Okay.
It's an ad hoc committee.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Chuck, it's the same form that you used for let's say Springfield Trails and Rural Economy. It's the same form. You would just put other and put in middle income housing committee.
Thank you.
Other comments from the audience, Zoom participants or in attendance? Seeing none, hearing none. Call for the vote. Starting on my left, Heather Frank.
Aye.
Mike Clark. Aye. Morris says aye. Cara Chase.
Aye.
Mike Schmidt.
Aye.
And so moved. Item number 4, discuss and act on new code of ethics for Act 171.
Yes, the state has enacted Act 71, which adopts a new code of ethics. There are a number of requirements, such as posting a new code on the website, posting a complaint form on the website, and mandated ethics training for members of all boards, committees, and commissions. The action that the board needs to take tonight are to appoint an employee or one of its own members to serve as the ethics liaison to the state's ethics commission, to assign a municipal officer or body to receive complaints alleging violations to the municipal code of ethics, and to assign a proposed code of ethics investigation and enforcement ordinance to the ordinance committee. And in your packet, I included the new municipal code of ethics that's now state law, the approved complaint form, the copy of whistleblower protections, and a copy of the proposed ordinance, the ordinance committee that I've done. I'm not gonna read the whole thing, but thank you. That's how I summarized it, what we need to do tonight. But the board by September 30th, all boards and commissions will have to take this mandated ethics training. It's an online course.
Did you say 10 days?
No.
No, I don't think so.
We're not here.
No, September.
We have to,
yeah.
before the end of the month.
Yeah, before the end of the month. But the things we have to do tonight are appoint the employer or one of its own members or one of you to serve as ethics liaison in the state ethics commission. Is there a volunteer? Then I suspect the town manager volunteered. That's all. There's one committee you're not on, I mean. So is there a motion?
Do we, you want, so unless somebody here on this board volunteers, that I read through the statute and it says a town employee is what the statute says. A town employee.
Yeah.
Not a member of this board, but we could do that. So, is the town manager appointing the town manager as the?
No,
employee?
this board has to appoint.
No, are you nominating the town manager as the employee? Because you have other employees.
I'm offering
that
him
you
the
could
town
nominate.
manager.
You have other employees you could nominate. And we would.
I'd rather not delay this longer. I think the town manager has offered to do this and we do not have a code of ethics motion yet.
So this is a motion to appoint the town manager to serve as the ethics liaison to the state's ethics commission.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move to appoint the town manager, Jeff Mopus, as our liaison officer to the state ethics commission.
I'll second.
We do have a motion and seconded to appoint a town manager to the code of ethics.
No, this is the state liaison.
State liaison.
We'll get to that one next.
Do we need to, we haven't adopted this yet, so do we need to adopt it as well, or is it a law?
No, you can't, it's law.
It's law, we don't have to adopt, we don't have to adopt it. And do we have to adopt, the whistleblower protection is the same, so
Yeah.
we don't have to
Correct.
separate
It
this.
just mandates that it's posted in every department.
Yeah, we don't have to separate it out, so we're good. Can you accept, Mr. Liaison?
You appointed me, I don't get a choice.
There you go, I like it.
Yeah. You want to add Mr. Chairman, you want to add the assigning a municipal officer or body to receive complaints? Do you want to volunteer for that position as well?
Well, I was gonna volunteer the select board, but I expect the select board is gonna volunteer me.
You're correct.
Okay. My recommendation is the select board, but your recommendation is the town manager, so.
We need a common place to submit those.
So what happens if the complaint is against the town manager?
Then, it would, in the policy, I would note if the complaint against the town manager to reach out to the select board chair.
Further discussion on the appointment of the town manager, the liaison of the code of ethics.
And to receive complaints.
And to receive complaints.
And to receive complaints, yeah.
So editorially, any code of ethics created by a group of politicians that I would fail the ethics test would really concern me.
Looks like the Groucho Marx thing in the club that would have me as a member.
Discussion from the audience. Not seeing any hands up or attempts to speak. I think we're good. There isn't any other comments. I'll call for the vote, starting on my left. Heather Frame.
Aye.
Mike Martin.
Aye.
Christie Moore says aye. Tara Chase.
Aye.
And Mike Schmidt.
Aye.
It is 5 in the affirmative. So. Thank you.
The only thing we need to do here is now we need to assign the proposed code of ethics investigation and enforcement ordinance to the ordinance committee for them to act on. I don't know if that requires a motion or if you just, well, just pass it on.
And generally speaking, the board has taken action to refer issues to the ordinance committee. But I guess I have a question about why the ordinance committee needs to write an ordinance that's already codified in state law and statute.
Because there's an ordinance process that we have to, that we're required to follow in order for an ordinance to be adopted.
I understand that, but why do we have to adopt an ordinance that's already statute? Doesn't state law supersede?
No, the state just says that that we have to develop.
Local codes.
In theory, you could change this, make minor changes to it, I would guess. I wouldn't, but I think you could.
Well,
So I entertain a motion to forward the Code of Ethics Investigation and Enforcement Ordinance to the Ordinance Committee.
Yes, I make the motion.
I'll second it.
Thank you, members. We do have a motion seconded to forward the state statute to the Ordinance Committee for the creation of an ordinance, which I don't expect to take a long discussion about that one, but is there any discussion from board members?
There's all the public warnings and stuff we have to do. So.
Sure. It's the ordinance procedure. Comments from the audience? Or Zoom participants? Not seeing any hands up. All attempts to speak. We'll call for the vote, starting on my left. Heather Frame.
Aye.
Mike Martin.
Nay.
Christy Moore says aye. Tara Chase.
Aye.
And Mike Smith.
Aye.
4 in the affirmative, 1 opposed.
Threw me off.
Do we want to count that as a former select board member's opinion chair that used to sit there and we vote no on anything? Never mind.
I'm not taking the minutes.
Don't enter that in a minute. Item number 5, set the next meeting date.
Yes, the approved board regular meeting schedule has meetings on the second and fourth Mondays of each month, September through May. I will be on vacation the last week of January. I'm asking whether the board would prefer to meet January 20th when I could attend, or on January 27th when I'm not available. We discussed this briefly, but I think since it's important to have a motion if the board wishes to move the meeting date to January 20th, because you already had a motion to set the meeting schedule. So I think if we're going to adjust that, it should be a motion.
I'll make a motion to switch the meeting to the 20th of January.
I'll second.
Who have a motion and seconded to set the next meeting date as January 20th, recognizing the absence of the town manager on the 27th, the following is our regular meeting night. And I only have one question that I'm curious about is that going to give you enough?
Yes. As long as we don't get a petition on 16th.
Yeah, we've sort of been functioning under this being plan for a while.
Yeah.
Okay, very good, thank you.
The school side, I'm not so certain, but I'll make accommodations for that. I'll know better after their meeting tonight, but your side will be ready for signature.
And we don't have to approve the school board.
I just have to make room for them.
Yep. Thank you. Discussion on the motion. Anyone here that can't make that motion? Okay, the board's comfortable with it.
Mike.
Any comments from the audience? On the motion to move next meeting to January 20th, a week early. Not seeing any hands up. Call for the vote, starting on the left. Heather Frame.
Aye.
Mike Martin.
Aye.
Christy Moore says aye. Howard Chase.
Aye.
Mike Schmidt.
Aye.
That is 5 in the affirmative. And our next meeting night is January 20th. Next on the agenda is the financial reports.
Yes, the warrants are prepared. And they'll be on the website tomorrow. as we get to the next item, let's see, I have a new assistant that started today. So we're still processing, but we'll get the warrants, come to the warrants on the website tomorrow. These are the expenditures for the last 2 weeks, if anybody has any questions. On the expenditures, there's one large item. It's 140,000, and that's the work on the water line on Severs Brook. That's the third month of payment. And now they're closed down for the winter shutdown.
That has not been completed, correct?
No, they'll come back again, when weather permits this spring, probably in April, to complete the work about the intersection of Wildine and Severs Brook.
All right, we'll move on to the manager's report.
Yes. I'm very pleased to announce that Hunter Van Velzor has accepted the assistant to the manager position. I expect Hunter to begin work the week of the 13th. In fact, she came in this morning. I want to thank Brian Benoit for his willingness to come in and help train Hunter. He'll come in starting next week to help train her. The long-term capital planning committee met last week with Jeff Strong to discuss a new public works garage, and with Bob Flint to discuss housing challenges and the industrial park development. There's been progress. I think that there were 3 bidders for the Riverside Culvert project. The state is in the process of awarding the bid. And I got the notice today that they've awarded it. So kind of a company we've never done business with. But the good news is the low bid was well below the budget. So our 5% will be about $170,000. So you're looking at 3.4 million. The last 3 years when we've had failed bids, the bids have been over 5 million. So we're not sure if this means that there's starting to be a more competitive market for bidding as the ARPA projects finish up, but we did definitely, we had 3 interested bidders, and the bids came in much closer to what we've been anticipating in prior years. This is very exciting. As this project began before I became town manager. The town's match is 5%, and as I just said, the 5% will be roughly $170,000, which will come out of the bridge fund. So we have funds available. There is also over $200 worth of contamination work, what they call non-contract work. So we'll work with to receive lead remediation funding to pay for that, but that shouldn't hit us. It shouldn't hit the taxpayers of Springfield directly. Of course, the lead remediation funds come from somewhere. It won't be on our property tax bill. Jeff Strong, Donnie Turner, and I met with representatives from V-Trans and our engineer for a site visit on Randall Hill. The town has received a structures grant that will pay for 80% of the replacement of the culvert up to $200,000. This work is expected to be completed done this summer. This will involve the closure of the road for several weeks. Unfortunately, this will require a lengthy detour for residents of Randall Hill. We apologize for the inconvenience, but the culvert is at the point of becoming unsafe and needs replacement. While the road is closed, the town will also repair a section of road just above the culvert that suffers from erosion. We've gone up and down. If you've come down Randall Hill on the right before you get to the culvert, it was falling apart, and we did a temporary patch, patch, but it needs to be more permanently fixed.
This right at the beginning.
Yes. Yeah, it's just above there. I guess there were 2 houses before the culvert.
Yeah.
You can see the culvert very easily from Clinton Street. It's a very steep culvert. It's a tight area to work. So it is a little tricky, but we've gone with a solution that V-Trans has approved. So we're pretty happy about that. I announced recently that FEMA allocated funds for the removal of the Weathersfield Dam. FEMA has now also obligated funds to remediate the slope failure at the end of Lincoln Street. The town is working with Manasquehney Regional Commission on both projects, and I expect that we'll see significant activity on both projects this year. Particularly because the permit to do the work on Weathersfield Dam expires in October of 25. Also, I notified the board. I left notes at their seats tonight that we're going to start seeing some work in County Park Pierre Sarazan, the owner of the former Oddfellows building, is upgrading the electrical connection from the transformer over to his building. Thank you. And so he's gonna have to dig up a little bit and connect over. The reason this is being done is so he gets his electricity from there, and he can take down the wire that goes across the river to the transformer on the other side. And once he does that, then he can complete work on his deck on the back. Deck on the back side, so he can do the work on the facade. And also, so it's the first step towards major progress on the back side of the building. I just want to make sure people will see this work coming out, going on January 23rd, starting on January 23rd. So I want to let people know what it was, and it should go well. We're not expecting any problems.
Very good. Any questions on the town manager's report? And the Compton Park addition of the electrical upgrades. You're not seeing any? Lots of good news. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great.
Future agenda item proposal. Heather?
No.
Mike?
No.
Christie? No. Tara?
No.
Mike Schmidt?
No.
Committee reports and announcements. Do we have, any member have any reports on committees? We do have several sets of minutes in our packet that we get periodically. Seeing any? Thank you for attending this evening. And for having Tom Kennedy down for market.
Thank you for allowing that on the agenda. Hopefully it was informative to the board.
Yes.
Very nice.
Thank you. So the next item is other minutes and correspondence, and this within our packets that the select board receives and available on the websites, and hard copies can be retrieved in the town manager's office are the Springfield Senior Center event calendar for January. Minutes of the long-term capital planning committee, December 10th, and the minutes of the library trustees publicity committee, January 8th. Are there any citizens that would like to comment this evening? Including the Zoom participants? No, looks like we've had some drop off. Seeing any attempts to speak?
Real quickly, for assistant manager and for the previous managers, Huggy's Corner always hosted a presentation on the budget. Huggy has retired. I'm very happy to announce that Chuck has reached out to me and has offered to host a budget presentation on SAPA, and we're hoping to get that done sometime next week. We're working on our calendars, right, Chuck? Chuck. Oh, I was just giving you credit because you're gonna do an interview on the budget with SAPA next week. Because you reached out to me about doing that, so. Okay. I was just giving you credit. I thought you were working on something else. I'm sorry.
No, I didn't.
But no, I was telling them with Puggy retiring that there was that you'd reached out and offered to do that. So thank you, Chuck.
Well,
Any other citizens this evening? Yeah, just rolling in.
Sorry, can't go yet. So as far as candidates for town meeting offices that are being elected at town meeting, I can give you a list of who's taken a petition and if you're interested. But we do have two spots that I don't have anybody claiming a petition for. One would be a cemetery commission. That's a 5-year term. Or there's one for the library. It's a 3-year term. As I mentioned, those spots are open with nobody running.
Perfect. The petition that she talked about it.
Yeah, she's good.
Okay.
Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
If there aren't any other citizens' comments, we go to the order this evening. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I still move. Michael.
Mike, yes, Mike, Em. We do have a motion to adjourn and seconded.
Brian, I look forward to you, my question about.
All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. All those want to stay longer, say nay.
An article
And
banning fire.
at 7:29.
Yes, I forwarded to Barbara. So, yeah,